For as long as people have called this place home, they've been welcomed with clean air, clean water, and an abundance of nature. As time went on, people saw the need to balance how we build cities with how we protect farms and forests. That's why across Greater Portland, in 24 cities and 3 counties, there's one metro government that brings us all together to maintain that vital balance, to provide services across cities and counties, to create a better future together. Hello, we're Metro. We plan for housing, jobs, and safe transportation. We protect land, air, and water by managing garbage and recycling. We support arts and culture by overseeing local venues to keep the economy growing. And we connect people to nature across 17,000 acres of parks and trails and at the Oregon Zoo. Metro is all of us working together, connecting how we live today with how we plan for the future. Hello, we're Metro, and so are you.
Good morning. We have a quorum, and I'm calling the Metro Council Business Meeting for July 27th, 2023 to order. I will now ask our clerk, Connor, to call the roll for attendance.
Thank you. Councilor Wong.
Present.
Councilor Gonzalez.
Present. Good morning.
Councilor Lewis.
Present.
Councilor Simpson and Rosenthal are both excused today, and President Peterson.
Here. Thank you. Before I begin our agenda items, can we please play the safety video for all the in-person attendees?
Hi, I'm John Rourke. I'm the head carpenter here at the Newmark Theater. Safety is a big part of my job. Some of the things we consider here at the Newmark Theater are the safety of our crews, the safety of the cast, the safety of the audience. I'm out here at the Newmark Theater. You're at Metro Regional Center. The council chamber is located on the 3rd floor of the building. In event of fire or a fire alarm, please exit through the door in the northeast corner of the room, go down the steps to the 2nd floor, and then exit through the main entrance by the reception desk and gather in the courtyard outside that entrance. In the event of a medical or fire emergency, please call 911 and notify security agent at the front desk. The nearest defibrillator is mounted on the steps leading from the reception desk down to Grand Avenue. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we will now open public communication on non-agenda items. Connor, will you please describe to the audience our procedures for the public communication portion of the meeting?
Yes, thank you, President Peterson. So if anyone wishes to testify on non-agenda items, now is the time to do so. Public testimony will be limited to 3 minutes, and we'll be managing a timer to go off at the 3-minute mark. If you've not already signed up to speak, you can do so now. We've unfortunately run out of blue cards in the back of the room, but you can raise your hand and I will call you up to testify. For those joining us on Zoom, if you have not already signed up, you can do so now by hitting the raise hand button, which depending on your version of Zoom is either in the reactions tab or at the bottom of your screen. And so to allow those on Zoom today to turn on their cameras, I'll promote you up to a full panelist. You'll need to accept that promotion, which will make you rejoin, and you'll be able to turn on your camera and unmute yourself after that. If you're dialing in on your phone, you can raise your hand by dialing *9. As a reminder to everybody testifying today, you do not need to give your physical address. However, please do identify yourself for the record before testifying. So with that, President Peterson, councilors, we've had some folks sign up in advance to testify today, so we'll start with them. We've also had some written testimony that was distributed to you all. So with that, first up, we'll have Rachel Plyler. So Rachel, your time will begin when you begin speaking.
Morning, Council. For the record, my name is Rachel Plyler, and I just want to thank you for your time today. I received this flyer last week outside the convention center at an event that I was attending. It claims that the event I was attending, which was associated with Her Voice movement, is a homophobic hate group, among other things. And so I'm grateful today just to have an opportunity to clear the air. First, let me just say that as Christians, we don't hate, we love. We believe in Jesus Christ. He's the way, the truth, and the life. He showed us the way that we're to love in everything we do and to love everything which he has created. It's our duty and our goal to love in all things, and to welcome everyone to what we are doing. We're not discriminating, we weren't breaking any law, and we aren't afraid of the LGBTQ community. In fact, I myself am a former member of the community. So we're here to let people know that there's actually a way to have freedom from unwanted sexual attractions. That's my story. I was unhappy for years in unwanted sexual attraction and behavior. But because I heard the truth of Jesus Christ from some brave people in my life who told me that, even though I was potentially unwilling to listen to them at the time, they told me he loved me more than I could imagine, that he could set me free, had a better way for my life. I can stand before you today completely free and happier than ever from those unwanted attractions. It was the truth of the gospel that was spoken in love which transformed my life, and I am eternally grateful for it. It's my right as a Christian and an American to have freedom of speech and freedom of religion, thanks to the First Amendment. And because of that, I won't back down from telling the truth and seeing others like me who have those unwanted attractions experience the freedom and happiness that I have found in Jesus. And it is my duty as a Christian to speak the truth in love, and I will carry on in sharing that truth of the gospel, which set me free. And I believe that that truth can transform our city for the better and make Portland a place that truly is a place of love and not hate. So I thank you for your time today.
Thank you. Next up, we'll have Mary Ann Schwab. And on deck, we have Marina Garcia.
Good morning. For the record, my name is Mary Ann Schwab, and I have new pronouns. Maladjusted rebel rouser. I got that from John Lewis when he was in Portland in 2007 and endorsed my book. And the people that were there, they kind of laughed because they know Mary Ann does just that. I'm here today to talk somewhat off the record because we have one more month, and I can't thank you enough for your quarterly newspaper. And the children, I have new people in my neighborhood, so I came to try to get a copy. School supplies are on sale right now, so parents wake up. So I'm delivering these to the new people in my neighborhood, and maybe the parents had already recycled theirs. There's one more activity coming up on August 19th, and boy, I'd like to get some of that apple cider. So there's other things that children can do. Children have no voice, nor do we elderly when you don't have access to a computer. And on that note, when I tried to find out how to find you, there's a 600 address on there. I get on the bus, I come here 2 buses. People on the bus said, oh no, she's wrong, you have to go across the river. So I walked from Stark Street up here to find your place. So if you could put the address in there, that would be a big help for anybody that wants to come. The real one, right here next to the Max. So the second thing I want to talk about is, despite, let's see, where did I go? The apple jam date, I think you have it there. And in my rush, I think I put the 16th for September, but no, it's in August. So that activity takes place at the Herald Territorial Park, and I hope that people can make it. The second thing I want to talk about is the Multnomah County Summer Reading Program. There's one more month, there's 3. And the elementary and high school kids can still participate in this, get some reading, and maybe get some extra credit in school when they go back to school. My third thing, I want to talk to the public at large, because many people are not aware of what happens to your computer. Maybe I can tell you what happened to mine. But Reader's Digest, June 23rd, stay safe from scams. People are coming in from other countries, they get your email, and before you know it, they've got your whole computer. I have 4,095 things have been added to my cell phone since I couldn't get the Apple to stop the crazy 8-ball and went down on a cab, came home on a cab, they kept it overnight, and they still couldn't get my Apple to open, which is no big deal. Except now that, and I kept saying, not now, not now, not now, and they forced it in there. And I have over 4,900 added to my telephone. That is a scam. They can get in, they can get your house, they can get your finance information, et cetera. And the last thing I want to say is that to read not just the Reader's Digest, but your most recent publication of AARP.
Thank
And
you,
with
Mary
that,
Ann.
I want to say thank you, and I noticed your next topic, and I'll take 1 second, please. The Metropolitan Transportation Improvement Program.
Oh, Mary Ann,
Please,
we'll have a-
please, please, pay
we'll have a
attention
separate
to
public
safe
comment
roads to
period
school,
later.
starting with Taylor Street near our library.
Thank you.
We've got to slow the traffic down.
Thank you, Mary Ann.
Appreciate your patience, and I'm a little on the nervous side, but do read this. The reason I was here is petition for government for redress of grievances. That's your address. Thank you.
Thank you. So next up, we have Marina Garcia, and on deck, we'll have Jessica Gentry. And Jessica, feel free to come up and take a seat now as well.
Good morning.
So Marina, your time will begin when you begin speaking.
Good morning, Metro Council. My name is Marina Garcia. I am a member of Laborers Local 483 and a guest services lead at the Oregon Zoo. I am here today on my own time because it is now the 27th day that the employees of Metro Parks and Nature and the Oregon Zoo have been working under an expired contract. Over the course of the last few years, we have put our health and safety at risk to continue to serve our communities through a global pandemic that killed over 1 million Americans and disabled millions more. We have worked in hazardous conditions without any additional pay or proper safety equipment. These conditions include poor air quality and extreme temperatures that have left Oregon Zoo employees with frostbite at least 2 years in a row. During that time, we have also lost approximately 10% of our spending power due to inflation, and that loss has not gone unnoticed. Many of us can now no longer afford to live in the communities that we serve. Many of us are currently living paycheck to paycheck, barely able to afford basic necessities like rent and groceries. And many of us do not have any savings available in case of an emergency. To supplement my income, like many of my coworkers have had to do, I personally have been selling my plasma as often as twice a week for months. You might be able to see the venipuncture scar on my right arm where I'm stabbed with a 16-gauge needle, which, if you are not familiar with, is only slightly smaller than a meat thermometer. With the additional money that I make from regularly selling my plasma, I have been able to build a small amount of savings. I have set this aside because my tío Miguel is currently undergoing experimental treatment for his late-stage lymphatic cancer in Los Angeles. While my family and I remain optimistic, I began selling my plasma because I was terrified that I would not be able to afford a plane ticket to my hometown to be able to see him one last time in case things took a turn for the worse. Wages that do not keep up with inflation are a pay cut, and your employees at Metro are hurting because of it. I urge you to please come back to the bargaining table with a fair contract that continues to support its workers the way that it has in the past. I appreciate you all listening, and thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. We now have Jessica Gentry, and on deck we have Grazuna Wright.
Hi, my name is Jessica Gentry. Thank you guys so much for allowing me this opportunity to come and speak with you. I too was at the Oregon Convention Center and received this flyer accusing of homophobic, Christo-fascist, white saviorist organization. And I just knew that it's my right to come and to speak truth to that matter. So this is definitely not my norm. It's my first time in a government type setting, and I'm honored to be here, and I appreciate you guys. But what compelled me to come and share actually is my daughter. You see, my beautiful daughter, Ellie, 3 years ago found herself suicidal. She was riddled with anxiety and depression and smoked weed every day, even to just get to the grocery store. She was in a same-sex relationship, and she was no longer the college-level athlete, the fun, vivacious, full-of-life daughter that I had raised and known. But what happened 3 years ago was that Ellie walked into a room that was speaking truth, and it resonated in her spirit. And she finally had an answer to the anxiety, the depression, and the addiction. and his name is Jesus. That day, because of someone's testimony of being freed, she also got free from addiction, from anxiety, and from same-sex attraction. You see, my daughter had the right to pursue happiness, and she had the right to pursue truth. And because it was spoken in a public place, my daughter had an opportunity to get free from the things that had held her in bondage. And so today, when I received this flyer today, I realized I need to come and speak that we need to continue to allow the truth to be spoken, whatever that is, to that person in public, and that nobody should have the right to come and silence us just because they disagree, because disagreement does not mean hate, and disagreement and love can coexist. And so I just come standing for truth and standing for our First Amendment right to be able to pursue happiness, to be able to speak in public places. And so I thank you for this opportunity to share.
Thank you. Next up, we've got Grezuana Wright, followed, and on deck we have Dashiell Harrison.
Hello. For the record, my name is Grezuana Wright, and I'm here to also address what happened at the conference. I attended the conference, and the first thing I wanted to address is that they were labeled as like a hate group. When I first came into the conference, I was identifying as a non-binary person, so I was going by they, them pronouns. I identified as a lesbian, and I was very masculine, and not once did they come on to me, not once did they say you need to pray, not once did they approach me and say, hey, you know what, like, you don't belong here. They completely welcomed me with open arms, and not once did they even really say anything to me until I went up to them and I'm like, hey, I need help, I need prayer. And they were there with absolutely loving arms. The church in itself, the conference, every single person who attended it. I spoke at Trans Pride 4 years ago. I was supposed to speak at Pride, this last Pride that just happened, and I was supposed to march on Pride. And the church, they helped me, and they spoke truth into me. And I just want to say, like, how loving they are as a Christian. We are not here to hate, and it would make me hypocritical to say, hey, I identified this way and now I don't accept you guys. I still love the LGBTQ community. I welcome them. I still talk to them, I welcome them into my environment. I don't judge them. I don't press my religion upon them saying, hey, you guys need to change, you have this issue or this issue. No, like, everybody battles with their own things. And I was set free that day. I was delivered that day. And I am forever grateful for what this community has done for me. I'm forever grateful for what the conference did for me, for what the members did for me, for what the church has done for me. And I just wanted to address that, like, we are not a hate group. They are not a hate group. They welcome everybody individually for who they are and exactly what moments that they are in life. And they just speak the truth. And that is what everyone has the right to do, is to speak the truth and what we believe in. That's everything. Thank you.
Thank you. So we now have Dashiell Harrison, and Mallory Crozier is on deck.
Good morning. My name is Dashiell Harrison. I use he, him pronouns. I'm a field representative with Laborers Local 483. And today I'm talking about the conditions faced by Metro employees who work in the parks and the zoo. This is an extremely dedicated and diligent group of people. Everyone I've talked to talks pretty much consistently about how much they love their jobs and how much they care about their work. Unfortunately, they're starting to worry that their jobs and work don't care about them. Over the last 5 years, Metro employees have lost about 10% in real wages. At the same time, the job has gotten a lot harder and a lot more dangerous. The opioid and mental health and houseless crises that our communities are experiencing have spilled into the park system. And every ranger I've spoken to has told me that the job just isn't what it was 5 years ago. Now, we brought these concerns about health and safety to the bargaining table, and we were told that Metro has no desire to pay health and safety premiums for workers working in dangerous and hazardous conditions. This added risk of injury to the insult that these employees are experiencing in terms of their loss of purchasing power. So I'm here today with a large contingent from that work group to ask the council to do whatever is necessary to ensure that Metro employees are paid a living wage, are able to afford to live in the community that they serve, and are treated with respect, and the hazards of the jobs are reflected in health and safety premiums. Thank you.
Thank you. We now have Mallory Crozier, and Samantha McCarroll is on deck.
Good morning, Metro Council. My name is Mallory Crozier. I use she, her pronouns, and I am a member of Laborers Local 483, and I am appearing today on my own time to provide testimony in support of our union bargaining team. I am currently a park ranger lead within Parks and Nature. I have been an employee of Metro for over 10 years, and I've seen a lot of changes in that time span. I think we can all acknowledge that in recent years, the Portland Metro region in which we work has drastically changed. Not only has there been significant economic changes, but other issues such as houselessness, addiction, and mental illness have affected what our roles are as public servants. As frontline essential employees, we are dealing with these changes every day. By doing that, our health and safety and lives are at risk. We are increasingly dealing with traumatic incidents ranging from difficult to navigate situations to dealing with various emergencies, many of which result in death. In many cases, we go through these traumatic incidents with little to no support. We have been expected to adapt our social responsibilities to provide support for people who need help. We are de-escalating situations near daily. We are entering spaces which could potentially be life-threatening, depending on the mental health status, depending on how people feel about public employees, depending on how people feel about a badge. This puts a toll on our own mental health too. Our health and safety doesn't stop with the direct public interaction. As essential employees, we continue to show up every day through the COVID shutdown, risking our own health, the health of our loved ones, and each of our colleagues and their families to make sure that our parks remained open, safe, clean, and welcoming to everyone. We continue to work in inclement weather, wildfire smoke, extreme temperatures, in order to make sure our parks and facilities remain open, safe, clean, and welcoming. As the economy has changed and the cost of living has increased, I personally feel the negative impacts this has, much like most people in the Portland metro region. I worked as a seasonal employee for 6.5 years with low wages to prove to Metro that I wanted a permanent full-time position. Once I reached my goals of gaining full-time employment, it was a huge sigh of relief. That relief came, and I felt like I was finally able to live comfortably to provide for my family. Now, with the recent economic changes, I'm struggling again. Our consumption had not changed. My grocery bill has doubled. Just to cover our basic needs, the costs have gone up to the point to where we are back to scraping by paycheck to paycheck. I do worry if I'm going to be able to afford school supplies and clothing for my children this fall. We are a passionate group of employees for what we do for Metro. We love our jobs, the career paths we chose with Metro, but our wages have not changed to reflect the regional economic changes. All we ask is that we are compensated appropriately and fairly for the work we put into this agency. So please help shape our future and consider Metro's essential employees when decision-making. Thank you for taking the time to hear my testimony.
Thank you. Next up, we have Samantha McCarroll, and on deck is Kendra Carrillo.
Good morning. My name is Samantha McCarroll. I am a member of the Laborers Local 483, and I am appearing today on my own time to provide testimony in support of our union bargaining team. I want to speak today not only for myself, but for my colleagues and friends that couldn't make it today. I want to speak of hardships and the health and sanitation issues that we have as essential employees. I had to join a food program for people who don't qualify for assistance because I can't afford food. Before I found them, I was going to different food banks as often as they would allow. I don't make enough money to support my family and to feed them comfortably, and I don't feel that that's too much to ask for what I do for Metro. I was hired as a park ranger pre-pandemic. The expectations have changed immensely since then. We work in the midst of the houseless and mental health crisis, making contacts and trying to help people in need. We clean up camps and post constantly. We are tired. My feelings are tired. My compassion is exhausted. They are working on us carrying Narcan to deal with people overdosing in our parks and our cemeteries. We clean up hypodermic needles strewn through the parks. I have pulled a half-dead woman out of a car with a needle in her arm to perform CPR waiting for the paramedics. I'll never forget her face. My colleagues pull drowning victims out of the river, and we clean up body matter after suicides. We are not just cleaning up bodily fluids during the pandemic, but we were facing thousands of people a day face to face during the height of that, the beginning and the end. We were and we are the front line of our work, and we should be compensated for the physical and the mental, emotional strain that we face regularly. The changing climate has impacted our safety as well. If it's blistering cold or if it's unbearably hot, we are outside cleaning, we're landscaping, we're making sure that the public is safe. When the smoke is so thick that you can chew it, we're out at a golf course re-chipping the fitness trail, even though you couldn't breathe, resulting in several employees calling out sick because they couldn't breathe or function the next day. For Metro to state that they are not interested in paying us hazard pay when we are working in a changing extreme climate and in increasingly dangerous and unstable conditions, it is unacceptable. We deserve to be properly compensated for inflation and cost of living, as well as the hazard of our jobs. Thank you.
Thank you. We now have Kendra Carrillo, and on deck is Jason Delibero.
Good morning, Metro Council. My name is Kendra Carrillo, use she, her pronouns, and I'm a member of the Laborers Local 483. I'm also the maintenance lead for Metro Parks. I'm here today to provide testimony in support of our bargaining team. But first, I'd like to just say thank you to my coworkers for providing their testimony today. This was tough for us to do. I'd like to talk a little bit about myself and discuss why I believe targeted wage increases and cost of living adjustments are crucial to continuing the important work that our frontline staff do every day. I'd also like to bring to your attention the importance of providing fair compensation to staff when working in hazardous conditions. So first, just a little bit about myself. So I'm a single mother of two beautiful boys, and I've made Portland my home for over 20 years. I'm proud to say that I'm the first and only person in my family to graduate college. This didn't come easy, like many others, probably many in this building today. I was working 2 minimum wage jobs to support my family. I eventually realized something had to change to make our lives better. And that's when I went back to school to pursue a career that was meaningful to me and that would allow me to support my family's basic needs. Several years later, and after substantial hardships and financial debt, I was fortunate to be hired by Metro. Words can't express how relieved and how excited I was to be part of the Metro family. Not only was I finally making a livable wage, but I was working in a field that I was so passionate about. I was hired by an organization that practices and supported my core values, and I got to work alongside the most passionate and dedicated group of people. To this very day, I feel the exact same way about Metro, about the position I hold and the employees that I call my Metro family. I absolutely love the work that I do, the communities I serve, and the impacts my work play in providing recreational experiences to our visitors. So fast forward 13 years, I've been with Metro for a little over 18 years now. I was finally able to purchase my first home, yay. This was a huge thing. I didn't have much expendable money, but I was able to pay my mortgage and my bills. Now today, just 4 years later, after purchasing my first home, I'm struggling once again. I feel like I'm just one paycheck away from losing everything that I've worked so hard for. I fear that I'm no longer able to support my family's basic needs with my current wages from the economic inflation. I'm currently working 40 to 60 hours a week, and on my off time, I'm doing odd jobs just to get by, including delivery services for food. I'm not the only employee in this position, Metro employee in this position. Several of my coworkers are in the same situation. So as you're aware, the past 5 years, the cost of living and inflation in the Portland metro region has risen drastically. Unfortunately, our last contract with minimal COLA increases hasn't come close to making up the difference, making our frontline and essential employees very vulnerable. At Metro, we talk a lot about encouraging healthy work-life balance. I'm constantly reminding staff to take time for mental wellness while I find myself pushing my limits just to make ends meet. The past few years, I've been extremely challenged, not only financially, but mentally and emotionally as well. We face some of the most unprecedented challenges through the pandemic as frontline staff. As a result, not only have our workloads increased, but we're wearing a lot of new hats each day. The hardships our communities and staff have faced with the houseless crisis, the opioid addiction, the substantial mental health decline has been really impactful. In addition to the economic and social changes, we have exposed ourselves to the environmental risks associated with poor air quality from fires, various inclement weather conditions, and situations that involve exposure to hazardous waste. Staff continue to work tirelessly with strength and compassion to provide support to those in need, while continuing to maintain our parks and green spaces at a very high standard, providing clean, safe, and welcoming recreational experiences, and also while trying to maintain a healthy home and work-life balance. I say all of this because Metro staff has truly gone above and beyond, adapting to the added responsibility and the changing climate. Metro leadership has undoubtedly acknowledged the hard work from staff, and that is appreciated. But now, right here today, we're asking council and leadership to demonstrate their support by supporting us with living wages, fair living wages, and compensation for hazardous working conditions. Thank you, and thank you for allowing me to go over.
Yeah, thank you. And I just want to say the stories are important, and I don't want to make anybody coming after all of these great stories. Just try to keep to 3 minutes because it is respectful to the others, and there's a whole giant agenda of things that we also have people coming to testify. And so I don't want to stop the stories, and I don't want to, but I do want to ask you to just try and stick to 3 minutes as we go forward. Thank you, though.
All right. Next up, we have Jason DeLibero, and on deck is Monica Haster.
Good morning. My name is Jason DeLibero. I'm an animal keeper at the Oregon Zoo. I'm also a member of the negotiating team for Laborers Local 483, the collective bargaining agreement representing the employees of the Oregon Zoo and Parks and Nature. First, I'd like to thank Council President Peterson and the other council members present here today for allowing me to provide comment on a topic that's a deep concern for me and my coworkers. I'm here on my own time to express how disheartened I am by the proposals that Metro has brought to the bargaining table. It's clear that Metro aims to devalue their employees through lower than fair market value wages, decreased safety protections, and lack of affordable health care for all employees. We, the Zoo and Parks and Nature employees, have had our purchasing power decreased by 10% amid record inflation rates and local property increases, which average about 11% per year since 2020. The average rent for a one-bedroom apartment in the metro area is $1,537 per month, while the average median income is $74,500. While, the average full-time Leona Metro employee makes between $53,000 and $66,000 a year. That's an $8,000 to $21,000 deficit from the average median income, with several employees under the poverty line. This signals a massive disadvantage to find affordable housing, which I know a lot of you guys that's part of your standpoints being on the council. Metro values, and I quote, building and supporting communities where all residents can experience a high quality of life and actively participate in charting their local future. Unfortunately, this is no longer a reality for us. We are being forced out of the very vibrant communities we've helped build and continue to serve on a daily basis. You guys have the ability to help us remain a part of these communities. Over the last few years, we faced a global pandemic, an increase in local wildfires, and related poor air quality, extreme temperatures, and national and local political unrest. During that time, we were asked to do more with less, and we did. We sacrificed, we were flexible, we were understanding, we risked our health and safety, we were patient amid countless changes. Now, Metro is refusing to discuss and negotiate safety protections and pay. They're showing their appreciation of our efforts by communicating that they have no desire to pay for work done in hazardous conditions. We have no desire to work in hazardous conditions, but the reality is that as required of us, we need to be compensated appropriately for that work. I'm here today to ask that Metro remembers their core values, keeps your promises to negotiate a fair and equitable deal for all zoo and parks and nature employees, because building back better starts here at home with their Metro employees. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Monica Haster, and on deck we'll have Daniel Zelli, who is testifying virtually.
Good morning, Metro Council. My name is Monica Castor. I'm a member of Laborers Local 483. I'm appearing today on my own time to provide testimony in support of our union bargaining team. In mid-April, I fractured my spine in 6 places and my sternum in 1. This has been one of the most difficult things I've ever experienced physically and emotionally. Every single day of these last 3 months should have been fully focused on recovering, but I have been unable to do that. I have worked for Metro for over 2 years as a variable hour employee, but unfortunately that means we get no benefits, no consistency of shifts, no short-term disability, and more, as well as a lack of living wage. Outside of my small amount of sick time, I did not get paid for any of my leave. The only thing saving me from crushing medical debt is the state-subsidized health coverage that I qualify for by being under the poverty line. I prepared to return to work with the knowledge that I would be actively harming my body, but financially I did not have a choice. Unfortunately, as we do not have any guarantee for hours when I did return, shifts were few and far between. Last week, I had 3 seizures in 48 hours. 1 while at work, and all due to the stress of working for Metro while undergoing a traumatic life change. We all want to grow and thrive in our workplace, but with our current wage and lack of benefits as variable hour employees, it is increasingly difficult to do so. I have seen many hardworking employees who love their job leave for opportunities that show up for them in ways that Metro currently does not. This will continue if things do not change for the better. Thank you for your time.
All right. Next up, we have Daniel Zelli. So Daniel, I'm going to go ahead and promote you. If you could go ahead and accept that promotion, you'll rejoin as a panelist. Hi, Daniel. You should be able to unmute yourself now. You'll have 3 minutes, and your time will begin when you begin speaking. Daniel, are you able to unmute? We can't hear you. I see you're unmuted, Daniel, but we still can't hear you. Okay, Daniel, I think we're going to come back.
Yes.
To, there we go. Now we can hear
I've worked it out. Thank you very much. Yes, I'd just like to bring testimony to a document that I received whilst attending the Her Voice conference recently, and I was quite disturbed by it because this document says hate has no place here, and then it says the homophobic, Christo-fascist, white saviorist organization Her Voice movement is convening at the Oregon Convention Center. And I was very distressed to receive that document because that is firstly so against my own personal views, and because I was part of that conference, these statements are directed at myself, and that is not what I support at all. But also, this is not the feeling or atmosphere or message that was conveyed at this conference. In fact, it was quite the opposite. It was one of love, acceptance, and the right for freedom of all people, including women and women's rights. And so this was really an offensive statement. And so as I looked at the terms and defined them, homophobic means fear or hatred, discomfort, or mistrust of people with lesbian, gay, or bisexual or transgender orientations. And as you've heard from previous testimony, people from that community did not feel that way at all. And I certainly would testify that that was not was conveyed. Secondly, it says Christo-fascist. Well, Her Voice movement is a Christian organization. It is believing in the Judeo-Christian worldview, but fascist means, somebody that is, in control and having strong dictatorial sort of efforts. Her Voice is not a political movement. It's not a lobby movement. It's a Christian organization trying to enhance the rights of women and bring them into a better place. It has no control or dictatorial sort of ability at all. And so this is a very incorrect statement. So lastly, this thing says it's a white saviorist. Well, just by the speaker lineup, you could tell that this is not a white only movement. It consisted of a number of women from different races, and men for that matter, women from different races, different colors, different ethnic backgrounds. So it's definitely not a white movement, and nor is it saviorist. The Her Voice movement is not the savior of anything. In fact, that would be contrary to the worldview of Her Voice movement, in that the only savior that is promoted by Her Voice movement is Jesus Christ. He's the savior. Her Voice movement is a life enriching, and it is...
Daniel, you're over time. If you could wrap it up in the next 10 seconds.
Okay. So I would just like to say that I was disturbed by this document, and the definitions in this document are unapplicable, incorrect, and I refute them on all accounts. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, so next we are, as a reminder to folks, we are taking testimony on non-agenda items at the moment. That is everybody who has signed up in advance. I believe that there are some folks in the room still who would like to testify because we ran out of blue cards. So if you would still like to testify, please go ahead and raise your hand and come up. Okay, yeah, please come up. And please just identify yourself for the record before testifying.
Hello, my name is Zane Neely. I am with the local 483. I work at the zoo. I do events, and I mostly put up the zoo lights. I know a lot of people every year really love to come to zoo lights, whether you're religious or not. I know it's a huge draw for the zoo. And when I started there, preface, I have a neurological disorder known as high-functioning autism. And I lost my family when I was very young, and I've suffered with depression because of it. A lot of dark times in my life, I've always found that I could come to the zoo, whether I was employed or not. And it was always a place for acceptance and would make me happy again. I would find calmness in it. And so when I started working there 3 years ago, they accepted me with open arms and friendliness like I haven't gotten before from any occupation. These people are my family now. My coworkers, they're everything to me. When I wake up, I dedicate myself to the zoo. Like I said, I don't have a family. I wake up and I just want to do my best for the zoo. I want to do my best for my coworkers. And I always try to make ends meet, and I always survive. But hearing what my coworkers have to go through every day just to make their ends meet, it's really hard to see for me. Like I said, I really, really care about these people. They're everything to me. I wouldn't be really happy at all if it weren't for these people. They're wonderful, and I just want to see them treated right. I love this zoo, and I want to keep working there for as long as I can, and just financially support myself. And yeah, that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. Is there anybody else in our physical audience who would like to testify? Thank you. And for anybody on Zoom, if you would like to sign up now, you can hit the raise hand button, which is either at the bottom of your screen or within the reactions tab.
Good morning, Metro Council. My name is Paige Barton. I am a field representative with Laborers Local 483. Our union is providing public comment today to provide narrative for the Metro Council about our contract priorities that we're consistently showing in negotiations. We've been seeing Metro's bargaining team strike proposal language in total that is responsive to these needs. And we're hoping to draw your attention today to who this contract is for, so that we can share understanding and that we can enter the next chapter of our labor relationship with the victory of a new agreement. I'm here to read for the record a comment on behalf of our member, Kendra Strom. She's at work today for Metro's events team. Kendra begins, In the most recent collective bargaining agreement, a variable hour employee is defined as an employee hired for the purpose of meeting emergency, non-recurring, or short-term workload needs, or to replace an employee during an approved leave period. I am a variable hour employee, and I'm approaching my 3rd season with the Oregon Zoo as an events laborer. We work on one of the largest annually recurring events in the Portland area, Zoo Lights. Labor for this one event starts in July and runs through March or later. The work we do is not emergency, short-term, or non-recurring work. We work like full-time employees, but without seeing any of the benefits. We are incorrectly classified and treated as expendable. We work outdoors in hazardous conditions, including extreme temperatures, inclement weather, and wildfire smoke. This past winter, we were expected to come into work during the snowstorm that shut down the rest of the city. If we were unable to make it into work in the unsafe conditions, many of us were unpaid for canceled shifts. We need hazardous conditions language in the contract to protect all of us whose work takes place outdoors. These conditions are also one of the many reasons for the need for higher wages. I make $17.12 an hour. 95% or more of our work is outside, and it's skilled labor. We work with heavy equipment and electricity. This past Zoo Lights season, I was shocked while working on a light fixture and was sent to the hospital. And I received 1 day off from work, which was paid from my accrued sick leave. I couldn't take more days off because I couldn't afford to, and went back to work still suffering the side effects of that electrical shock. We face these risks at work every day, but we don't have hazard pay, healthcare, or leave for traumatic incidents. The need for higher wages, hazard pay, healthcare, and traumatic incident leave couldn't be more urgent. Thank you for your time this morning. We really appreciate it.
Thank you. All right, I don't see any more hands up on Zoom. Is there anybody else in the room who would like to testify? Okay. That is all that we have signed up, and I don't see any hands that have gone up on Zoom. President Peterson.
Thank you. I'm going to close public hearing and just take a moment to recognize both groups that testified today. To Lyona, thank you. To all of you who spoke and shared your stories. They're powerful and appreciated. I think we appreciate understanding a little bit more about why you're asking for what you're asking. And I'm sure that our executive team and our COO also heard those stories and want to make sure that you walk away from this knowing that we heard and we value you. And we will try and figure out how to move forward from here. Obviously, we can't negotiate as the elected body, so we can put our values out there, and we have certainly done that. And I appreciate you, and we'll be looking forward to having a contract that we can all agree with and move on, because we do want you to feel welcome in Metro. A lot of you have been here for a very long time, and I very much appreciate that. I know the council does. Second, on the Her Voice, I appreciate you coming and giving your perspective. I think it's important as a conversation. We also want to make sure that it's understood maybe where the issues were coming from the other perspective. And that is that we do try to create a very open, safe space for anybody attending our events or any of our employees working events. And so to any of either of those folks that are not in the room, I want to say Metro does have the value of having a safe space. We also have to meet our constitutional requirements for allowing for people to have different perspectives and be able to talk about them. And so it's a very difficult thing to hold both these things in our hands. And I just want to say to both the public that may have been misinterpreting or even offended, and our employees that there is a constitutional right, and we recognize that. So With that, I just want to also say I appreciate all of you coming forward. I know it does take courage and thought and passion to come forward, so thank you. Counselors, is there anything else anybody wishes to add at this point in recognition?
Madam
Counselor
President.
Nolan?
Thank you, Madam President. I want to briefly echo some of those sentiments. In particular, I want to speak to the LIUNA members who are here. This is not your venue usually, and to step forward and get outside your comfort zone is acknowledged. Sitting in front of a microphone can be challenging, but the stories you told us, and it isn't just the four of us sitting at the front of this dais who are listening. The people on our negotiating team are listening to both you and what the president just said. I want to thank you for your courage. I want to thank you for the care and attention and dedication you bring to the work every day. And I am eagerly looking forward to a resolution that can satisfy everybody. Thanks.
Great. Anything else, Counselor Lewis?
Thank you. I just want to echo the thanks, particularly to everybody who came today to share personal and powerful stories. The LIUNA folks who are here, not as part of their work, but who are so integral to what we do at Metro, whether it be at the zoo or any of our scattered sites in parks and nature. Just want to recognize that our ears are open. And as President said, we are not able to be at the table. We can't negotiate, but we can amplify the importance of hearing your personal stories and how they tie into what's happening at a table. There are so many things that are happening in this world, and you are at the front lines of some of them in ways that I don't think we all see all the time. So thank you for shining a light on that today.
Great, thanks. With that, we're going to move forward with our meeting. And before we get into the consent agenda, our urban growth boundary update, folks have graciously said that they would be willing to come back to another meeting since we are already an hour into our meeting. So thank you. We'll reschedule that and move on with the rest of our agenda. And just a thank you again to staff for being prepared yet again for an urban growth boundary report discussion, and we will get that on as soon as we can. Thanks. Moving on to our today's consent agenda, it consists now of 2 items, consideration 3 items. They're actually 3 items, correct?
Yes.
Okay. Now consists of 3 items, consideration of the May 4th, the May 18th, and the June 22nd, 2023 council meeting minutes. Do I have a motion for the consent agenda?
Councilor Gonzalez, move approval.
Thank you.
Nolan seconds.
It's been moved by Councilor Gonzalez and seconded by Councilor Nolan. All those in favor say aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye. All those opposed? The motion passes. Thank you. We'll move on to our public hearing. We have a public hearing as part of the public comment period for the draft 2023 Regional Transportation Plan and draft 2023 High Capacity Transit Strategy. Councilors, as you recall, we last discussed the drafts at our June 29th meeting when we voted to put them out for public review. We have staff here today to give a brief presentation, and then we'll move to our public hearing. As a reminder, this is not the only opportunity to give public comment on the RTP draft and the high capacity transit strategy. The comment period is open now through August 25th. And today I'll kick it over to Catherine Charlo, our Metro's Planning, Research, and Development Director, and Kim Ellis, our Principal Transportation Planner. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Council President Peterson and Metro Council. We appreciate the chance to just briefly introduce the topic of the RTP, Regional Transportation Plan, public hearing today. Kim has about 6 slides to make sure everyone has the context for what we're talking about. As Council President Peterson mentioned, this shouldn't be new to you, what's in the slide, and it won't be your last time, obviously, to talk about this. The testimony you hear will come back through the committees, through TPAC and JPAC, and we'll bring a staff recommendation and responses and a summary of comments later in the year. So thanks so much, and turn it over to Kim.
Great, thank you, Catherine, and Metro Council. Good morning, Metro Council President and Metro Councilors. Next slide, please. For the record, I am Kim Ellis. I'm a principal planner here at Metro and the project manager for the Regional Transportation Plan update. This is the timeline. We've been working on this for almost 2 years since we started the scoping phase, and we are working to have the plan, have Metro Council and the Joint Policy Advisory Committee on Transportation to take final action in November. So this public comment period is a key part of the work that we do to finalize the plan before you and JPAC consider final action. Next slide. These are the primary documents that are available on Metro's website at www.oregonmetro.gov/RTP. There is a full plan of the regional transportation plan as well as the draft high-capacity transit strategy. They both also have supporting appendices that are available to download, and there's more information about other ways that the public can weigh in, as well as our agency partners and other folks that would like to provide feedback during this comment period. Next slide. This comment period is one of many opportunities that have really shaped what is the public review draft that is being considered right now, and that will be continuing as we go forward to finalize the process. We have done a lot of engagement with our jurisdictional partners, very significant engagement with community-based organizations throughout the process, online surveys, and others that are shown here on this slide. Next slide. Throughout this engagement, we continue to hear safety is the top concern of community across the region, concerns about the climate crisis that we are facing, importance of continuing to maintain our system, investing more in transit, and continuing to make our transportation system accessible for all people, all ages, and abilities. Next slide. And in response to the feedback that we've heard to date and discussions that Council and the Joint Policy Advisory Committee on Transportation have had, there's new policies related to pricing, mobility, and resilience that are part of this plan. We've also made updates to other policies that will continue to guide transportation planning and decision-making in the region going forward. Next slide. The draft plan also includes more than $68 billion worth of investments that reflect priorities identified by our local agency partners, the Oregon Department of Transportation, TriMet, SMART, and other transportation agencies throughout the region, reflecting priorities that were identified in their planning work prior to this update. Next slide. The 45-day comment period began, as Council President Peterson said, on July 10th and will go through August 25th, building on the engagement and feedback that we've received to date. We have an online survey. There's an online comment form. The public is invited to send email, letters. There's also a phone, today's public hearing, and then we'll also be doing more formal consultation meetings with agency partners, tribes, and continuing to work with Metro's technical and policy advisory committees and county level coordinating committees to get feedback. Next slide. So again, more information about the draft plan, the regional transportation plan, the draft high-capacity transit strategy is available at oregonmetro.gov/RTP. And I will turn it back over to you, Council President, for your hearing.
Oh, great. Thank you for that update. I will now open the public hearing on the draft 2023 Regional Transportation Plan and draft 2023 High-Capacity Transit Strategy. Connor, will you please describe to the audience our procedures for the public hearing?
Yes, thank you, President Peterson. So if anyone wishes to testify on the draft 2023 Regional Transportation Plan and draft 2023 High-Capacity Transit Strategy, now is the time to do so. Public testimony will be limited to 3 minutes, and I'll manage the timer to go off at the 3-minute mark. If you've not already signed up to testify, you can do so now by raising your hand in the room once we get through the folks who have signed up in advance, or by raising your hand on Zoom. And for those joining on Zoom today, once again, I'll be promoting you to a full panelist. So I'll call your name. You'll see a window pop up asking you to accept the promotion. Once you accept that, you'll rejoin and be able to turn on your camera and unmute yourself. As a reminder to everybody testifying today, you do not need to give your physical address. However, please do identify yourself for the record before testifying. So with that, President Peterson, councilors, we have had some folks sign up in advance to testify. And up first, we have Indy Namkung. And up on deck, we have Tony Jordan.
All right. Good morning, Metro Councilors. Thank you for the opportunity to comment on the draft 2023 Regional Transportation Plan. For the record, my name is Indy Namkung. I'm the Transportation Justice Coordinator for Verde, and I serve as a community representative on TPAC. Verde's mission is to serve communities by building environmental wealth through social enterprise, outreach, and advocacy. We're based in Northeast Portland in the Cully neighborhood. Our diverse community was annexed into the city in the 80s, and at the time, our neighborhood was built with substandard roads, a lot of which didn't have sidewalks. Today, that count is about up to 35% of our streets, and we still have multiple streets in the high-end jury network crisscrossing our community, like Killingsworth, Lombard, and 82nd Avenue. It's why we partnered with Metro in the Getting There Together Coalition in 2020, and why we're here today. Hundreds of people have died in crashes on our streets since the last RTP update. A disproportionate number of those people were Black, Indigenous, and people of color, pedestrians and cyclists, vulnerable system users, and in neighborhoods like ours, experiencing multiple overlapping inequities. This is our constituency at Verde, and the reason the top priority for the community members that we spoke to in our RTP engagement was safety. These deaths aren't just a tragedy, they're a trade-off made by every level of government over the course of decades. It's an accumulation of decisions that time, energy, and money that could go to building every sidewalk, protected bike lane, curb ramp, or traffic calming device that we need to get that number to zero could be better spent on a new mega project that's built for the previous century of transportation and not the next one. With transportation funding challenges at every level of government, we're being told to expect more trade-offs to come. So with that said, I want to applaud the work done by the Metro planning staff and the many committee members, stakeholders, and community members to get us to a draft that illuminates these trade-offs and sets a hopeful course for the future. I particularly want to highlight the updates to the policies in Chapter 3 of the RTP. The pricing policy updates are well-tuned and equitable, and the motor vehicle network policies will ensure that we're using the best safety tools for the job in our network without adding unplanned or unaffordable capacity. However, it does concern me to see that with all the resources and all the policies and visions laid out in this plan, the system analysis indicates that we're still on track to fall far short of our safety, equity, and mobility goals between now and 2045. This contradiction is why I'd urge you in this RTP and in your implementation work to ensure projects are prioritized and held accountable to the goals and policies of this plan without exception or delay. This will be particularly important with bundled projects currently in the financially constrained list for which that information isn't yet available to the public. By acting with conviction, you can begin to bridge the gap between our vision and our reality when it comes to safety, equity, and mobility for all. And we have to, because people's lives are falling through that gap. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you. Up next, we have Tony Jordan, and on deck is Ethan Rohrbach.
Hello, good morning. My name is Tony Jordan. I am the president of the Parking Reform Network. I'm here, thank you for holding this hearing, and I'm here to comment on the RTP, specifically about pricing and probably predictably about parking pricing. Parking pricing is technically pretty easy. It's proven and effective, and it's fiscally fantastic. The climate-friendly and equitable communities policies that the state has implemented are creating a great need and opportunity for on-street parking pricing and other parking management. And to get the most out of that policy, which dovetails with our regional transportation plan, a regional parking pricing program could be transformative and very helpful. This is really exciting stuff for me as someone who watches parking policy nationwide. This is a big deal that all these suburban communities are doing these reforms. There are some opportunities I think that Metro can have, and I'm not an expert on the RTP, so I don't know if all this falls in line, but I'll just throw these out there. For one, definitely with the RTP, move the parking discussion more back into the pricing area. I noticed it was like mentioned as, oh, it's in this climate section. It probably should have quite a substantial section. Their communities need resources, and I think the metro governments can get resources from Metro on how to do pricing of their curbs to save them time and effective strategies. We have this booklet I'll leave. It's like a parking benefit district guidebook, which is, you know, charging for on-street parking and reinvesting that money in walkability. I think that Metro could facilitate Metro-wide mitigations for impacts to low-income communities. There may be a regional program so that every city doesn't have to reinvent the wheel on how to mitigate impacts. Facilitate and promote regional interoperability and consistency among wayfinding and pricing applications would be something that maybe could happen. And provide leadership on transportation demand management strategies like parking cash out and other commuter parking surcharges would be some ideas there. We should keep in mind the strong connections between land use and transportation and how big of an impact specifically car parking has on meeting those goals. If we want to reduce traffic in VMT, we can't keep building parking at current rates. It's impossible, and we can't keep providing it for so cheap. So there's an opportunity here to really lead the nation again. What we do in this region is watched and replicated other places. So let's live up to that reputation and do a great job. Thank you.
Thank you. All right. We now have Ethan Rohrbach. So Ethan, I'm going to go ahead and promote you up. All right. And on deck, we have Sam Herron. Ethan, you should be able to unmute yourself now and turn on your camera if you'd like. You'll have 3 minutes, and your time will begin when you begin speaking.
Excellent. Thank you. Madam President, members of the council, my name is Ethan Rohrbach. I am a research associate at the Cascade Policy Institute. I have some concerns with Metro's plans to continue investing in transit-oriented development in the Regional Transportation Plan. Transit-oriented development is defined as development built close to transit, ideally within a quarter mile, which gives people easy access to everything they need. Transit is supposed to be fast, reliable, and widely used. Some coworkers and I went to the iconic Orenco light rail station in Hillsborough to observe whether this is based in reality. So every Wednesday for the last 4 weeks, we counted all the people going in and out of Orenco station between 4 and 6 p.m., the peak traffic hours. We found, to our best ability, that people who used the West Side Max train accounted for less than 6% of all passenger trips in and out of Orenco, compared to 82% of those who traveled via car, truck, or bus, and about 12% who biked or walked. This is an extremely lopsided mode split. Among those who took the MAX, about 1 in every 6 people used a bus to get there. And out of 18 total rail trips, half of those never came. This data indicates that after 25 years, the light rail station in Orenco is far from top consumer attraction. Even if people do use transit, it is uncertain whether they will even walk or bike straight there. The MAX is not fast, reliable, or widely used. The data should also show that low-income residents are largely not taking the MAX, even with affordable housing for 314 people very close to the train. Based on this, I am unsure why Metro wants to transition to affordable housing, specifically the requirement in the strategic plan that 50% of TOD units should be 80% or less of the AMI. This can help, and so can housing tax credits, but poor residents who continue to drive cars might not relinquish them, regardless of expectations. So I think it is uncertain whether targeted subsidies for affordable housing, as advocated in policies 1 through 3 of the Transportation Equity Plan, will actually increase ridership. More low-income housing could also limit parking and deter developers. If parking is phased out of TODs to encourage train use, it might increase the need for subsidies to keep developers from shying away if residents continue to drive. With this said, I advise the board to defund or delete any further TOD investments from their program budget. The end goal should not be to force residents who already drive and live happily in transit-oriented communities to change their mode of transportation. And with that concludes my testimony. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we now have Sam Herron, and on deck is Micah De Silva.
Good morning, council members. I'm Sam Herron, a research associate at Cascade Policy Institute. According to Metro, high-capacity transit is frequent, fast, direct, and needs to move a high volume of people. Metro's RTP calls for the expansion of this high-capacity transit. In my opinion, this is a mistake and will hurt taxpayers while providing little benefit, just like some of the past high-capacity transit projects that do not fulfill any of the previously mentioned characteristics. Some examples of this are the slow Portland streetcar, or the Max Yellow Line, which underperformed its estimated capacity by 50%. One part of Metro's short-term strategy is the 82nd Avenue Transit Project. This includes new buses with greater capacity and a possible bus rapid transit. The 82nd Avenue corridor is currently served by TriMet's Bus Line 72. This is TriMet's busiest line, but does it need to be expanded and converted into BRT? First, a BRT project will take away a lane from cars, the most popular form of transportation, making traffic much worse. Second, before the pandemic, Line 72 had 80 to 90,000 boardings per week. Now that number's down to 59,000. That's under 65% of its peak usage. Line 72 was operating for years without trouble at a much higher capacity. And even before COVID, ridership was decreasing. So why expand something that's shrinking? Rather than expanding, Metro should focus on terminating lines that are not being used. As of this spring, the West commuter rail from Beaverton to Wilsonville sees only 450 daily boardings. That's only 225 riders, assuming a round trip. To put that in perspective, the least popular of the 5 Max rail lines, the Orange Line, has more than 5,000 daily boardings. Meanwhile, the most popular line, Blue, has almost 30,000. Should West be considered high-capacity transit? It never even reached the lower end of its forecasted boardings. This ghost train is not just a waste of space, but a waste of money as well. Every ride costs taxpayers $103. Multiplied by the daily boardings, West costs taxpayers more than $46,000 every single day it runs. Metro should urge TriMet to stop running West. And with the millions saved, you could help provide more effective modes of transportation for lower-income Oregonians, possibly car or ride-hailing vouchers, which are much better than empty buses and trains going to and fro. The overarching point I'm trying to make here is to consider an alternative. TriMet's ridership peaked in 2012 to 2013, but paradoxically, its total operating costs keep increasing. This new plan calls for increased high-capacity transit when existing forms of it are not even close. I urge Metro to eradicate underperforming lines and reallocate its funds before adding new ones. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we now have Micah De Silva, and up next on deck is Zachary Lauritsen.
Good morning, Council. My name is Micah De Silva, and I'm a research associate at Cascade Policy Institute here in Portland. I would like to use my time today to contribute to the discussion on the recent shift in measurement standards regarding VMT per capita. VMT is intended to act as a stand-in for reductions in greenhouse gas emissions and congestion, but in practice, using this measure of success is often inaccurate and regressive. Using vehicle miles traveled to approximate greenhouse gas emissions is already an outdated policy. Many Oregonians already use electric vehicles, which produce zero emissions, and the state of Oregon will completely phase out new non-electric vehicles by 2035. While VMT might once have been a useful stand-in for emissions, it's not a useful measure going forward. VMT reductions are also intended to measure success in reducing road congestion, replacing past and proven measures like volume to capacity. But VMT is even less suited for this task. It only measures the average number of miles traveled by drivers, not congestion or speed. Even if all congestion were relieved today, VMT would not change, as people would still need to travel the same distance to get to the same destinations. Reducing VMT to reduce congestion is like trying to reduce the number of students in a school to solve the problem of overcrowded classrooms. Yes, fewer students would mean less crowding, but that wouldn't improve access to quality education. In fact, it would mean that some children would now be out of school entirely. Similarly, dealing with congestion by reducing the number of cars on the road may lessen traffic, but it doesn't provide affordable or accessible transportation for everyone. The RTP's proposed strategies to use pricing to reduce VMT will mean that many who need to travel could find themselves without affordable options. High congestion impacts equity-focused areas most significantly. People in equity-focused areas drive more. Low-income and communities of color commute longer on average than other drivers. As mentioned in the RTP, housing is cheaper the further you get from population centers. The executive summary states, in an era when high housing costs make it challenging for many people to live in transportation-rich neighborhoods, the region may need to take new approaches, such as congestion pricing, among other things, to meet ambitious greenhouse gas and VMT reduction targets. In the current environment, public transit is not a suitable substitute for driving for most Oregonians. Up to 10 times as many jobs in the Portland region are accessible by car compared to transit, and 45% of workers live in a different county than they work in. In the midst of an affordable housing crisis, disadvantaged individuals must make trade-offs between finding affordable housing and having to commute, with many having no real choice at all. Using pricing to attempt to reduce driving and thereby reduce congestion will simply impose an even higher burden on those least able to afford it. And when success is measured in roads clearing up because some people can't afford to drive, it should signal that we have veered far off the path of equitable transportation for all. VMT reduction is not an equitable solution to congested roads, it does not approximate emissions, and it does not function as a replacement for volume to capacity. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, we now have Zachary Luritzen, and on deck is Sidley Ramirez Sierra.
Good morning, councilors. My name is Zachary Luritzen. I'm the interim director at Oregon Walks. Thank you for the opportunity to be here to talk about the RTP. You're going to hear from a lot of people about specific policies and projects. I'm actually going to zoom out a little bit and talk about philosophy and maybe some reminders about urgency and courage. And so to set the context, you've, I'm sure, seen the news about our record traffic fatalities in the last couple of weeks, 8 deaths in a 10-day stretch. You've read the news about heat waves and heat domes all across the world, across the United States, ice melt in the Arctic. It's an urgent time. And I say that because when I look at the RTP, I see a number of massive projects that double, triple, and quadruple down on these exact same patterns of travel that got us here. We're talking about widening the 217. We're talking about a doubling of the width of the I-5 bridge. We're talking about adding lanes on the 205 and the I-5. And I get why these projects are on the plan. There's pressure to relieve congestion and to move freight. And yet, these widening projects won't relieve congestion in the long term. And there's a grand total of 0 examples of adding lanes, fixing congestion in the long term. 0. So unless we're planning to add lanes today and tomorrow and in 10 years and in 50 years, this is not a long-term solution. And I'd also add that widening freeways is not popular. People don't want interstates ripping through their communities. They don't want the noise, they don't want the pollution, they don't want the danger. What they want is to not be stuck in traffic. And there are strategies to achieve that. And they're long-term strategies, right? It's aggressively building out transit, it's implementing congestion pricing, it's building out protected bicycle lanes, it's development patterns that make it so that people don't have to drive everywhere that they go. These are the long-term solutions. And to be totally fair, a lot of these projects and policies are in this RTP, and I want to acknowledge that. But if you exercise during the day and then you eat 2 quarts of ice cream in the night, you're not going anywhere, right? And so that's not progress. And what I see happening here is that ODOT is asking you, and frankly, I think they're putting you into a really terrible position to tax through tolls your constituents, suck up billions of dollars of revenue from your communities, and then put that money into freeway widening projects that will only make our fatality problems and climate problems worse now and harder to solve in the future. So I'll also note that if safety is indeed the #1 priority, as noted earlier, then ODOT would be investing in and making safe their dangerous orphan highways that are crisscrossing your districts left and right, if that's really what we're trying to achieve. It's going to take courage to do these changes and to push back against the status quo and to end the vicious cycle of death and maiming on our streets. You all hold power, and I encourage you to flex those muscles and feel inspired to guide this RTP so that we're taking 2 steps forward and 1 step back. Thank you.
Thank you. Up next, we have Ramirez Sierra, and on deck is Bergen Utoski.
Good morning, President Peterson, councilors. Thank you for the opportunity to comment on the draft regional transportation plan. My name is Sitlali Ramirez. I am a 25-year-old resident of Clackamas County and a student at PSU. I work with the Oregon Friendly Driver Program at the Street Trust, and I'm here today to share my experiences and thoughts about our transportation system. Growing up in Clackamas County, an area underserved by public and active transportation options, I've experienced firsthand the difficulties and dangers associated with the lack of safe infrastructure. I've seen family members and friends navigate unsafe routes, dodging cars while trying to get to school, work, or just trying to cross the street. As a college student, I heavily rely on public transportation, and I can tell you that it is not adequate where I live. Our transit system's inefficiencies and lack of safety measures are beyond just inconveniences. They affect my quality of life and the life of many others. They disrupt my ability to be successful in school, my career, and my sense of safety. The updated policies in Chapter 3 of the RTP will set out our region on a path towards improving climate, safety, and equity in our transportation system. However, we must apply them with urgency and ensure that all projects adhere to these policies without exception. This includes bundled projects like ODOT safety and operations projects. This $1.2 billion in projects must be transparent and clearly prioritized to meet all community needs, especially in underserved parts of the region like Clackamas County. We are facing a transportation safety crisis. As a resident, a student, safety educator, and taxpayer in this community, I urge Metro to prioritize projects based on safety, equity, and public transportation needs identified in the system analysis. Our future, my future, is dependent on our ability to ensure safe and accessible transportation for everyone with the urgency this current crisis demands, especially for those in BIPOC and low-income communities who are disproportionately affected by these issues. I ask you to please consider our needs and experiences when planning for the future of transportation in our county. We are more than statistics. We are individuals whose lives depend on your decisions. Thank you, President Pearson and councilors, for your time and for the opportunity to share my testimonial.
Thank you. So we now have Bergen Utoski, followed by Sarah Iannarone.
Hi, everybody. My name is Bergen Utoski. I serve as a staff member at the Street Trust, and I conducted listening sessions with people from underserved communities about this RTP update. Through this work, I've been privileged to listen and learn from their experiences navigating our transportation system. First, I'd like to acknowledge that we're in the midst of a safety crisis on our streets. According to a recent report from the Regional Transportation Plan Engagement, our community members have shared harrowing experiences and fears about pedestrian safety. One participant shared, I live in East Portland in the Park Rose area, and the lack of sidewalks out here makes walking difficult and unsafe. Kids have to walk in the streets to get to school. There's also really poor lighting on busy streets. Another participant remarked, we have prioritized transportation for people with financial resources to get to downtown Portland. Most people with lower incomes live their lives outside of downtown. Where do average people go and those without cars, where do average people and those without cars need to go, and how well is the transportation system set up to accommodate that? These experiences are not outliers, but symptoms of a deeply traveled, inequitable system. Our community has spoken, and their demands are clear. They want safer streets, better transit, and more accessible and reliable transportation options. They want to be able to travel without fear. This calls for our immediate attention. We're not on track to meet the targets of reducing fatal and serious injury crashes to 0 by 2035. This is not just about numbers. This is lives at stake. We have seen a surge in traffic fatalities with a disproportionately high impact on BIPOC communities and low-income people. Therefore, we urge Metro to prioritize projects based on safety, equity, and the transportation needs identified in Chapter 7 System Analysis. We appreciate the significant investments proposed through this plan update, but given the epidemic of traffic fatalities, it's not enough and it's not fast enough. We recognize and appreciate the inclusion of historically disadvantaged community members in this conversation, including that shared at the recent council and TPAC meetings by my colleague, Sarah Iannarone. Voices like this in our community deserve more than just being heard. They deserve action and accountability. We must ensure that before we come back together to discuss this again later this summer, Metro refined Chapter 8 to include a very real plan and significant investments to address community equity and accountability concerns. This should be done in continued partnership with the communities most impacted by these ongoing inequities and challenges in our transportation system. I'm here today not only as a representative of the Street Trust, but also as a resident of our region. I'm proud of our community's resilience, engagement, and drive for change. We deserve a safe and equitable transportation system, and it's our responsibility to make this happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Up next, we have Sarah Iannarone, and on deck is Joe Courtwright.
I don't know how to share screen and I testify in person.
Thank you.
Sorry, it's really run through.
Thanks, Sarah.
Good morning. My name is Sarah Iannarone. Thank you, President Peterson and Council, for the opportunity to comment here today. I'm here on behalf of the Street Trust. We've had the opportunity to work closely with various advisory committees over the past 2 years to inform development of the plan under discussion today. And we're not here to advise you further, but just to emphasize a few of our greatest concerns and points and make sure that we're carrying forward what we're hearing from our work in the community as well. We see ourselves as a dedicated partner in this work with Metro. We also like to work with organizations like higher education so we can get empirical studies about the impacts of transit and transit-oriented development. So I'm happy to share any research on that as well, especially when it's been peer-reviewed. But ultimately, I'm here as a representative for street users who are concerned about the safety of our streets, regardless of mode, who care about equitable mobility, and they want to see investments that lead to health and opportunity in our communities. The plan before us represents considerable efforts on behalf of Metro staff, and I applaud them for their hard work and care. At the same time, this plan sits at the intersection of 3 really serious crises: the climate crisis, a surge in traffic fatalities, and deep-seated racial inequality. Recent projections from the Governor's Highway Safety Association are projecting that Oregon's going to have the 3rd highest potential spike in pedestrian deaths in 2023. Coupled with findings from Multnomah County Reach Transportation Justice Report, it's clear that these statistics translate into tangible daily trauma for our region's Black, BIPOC, or Black, Indigenous, and residents of color. This distressing reality underscores the urgency for implementing the investments outlined in the plan with strict adherence to the very forward-looking policies in Chapter 3. While it is essential to aim high with our plans, and I applaud Metro for doing so, the most critical factor lies, as you know, in implementation. We must view this RTP as more than a guideline. It stands as a binding commitment to the community that we are dedicated to achieving the safety goals and access to opportunity that they're demanding. As my colleague previously discussed, some of the feedback that we got through our community engagement was that we needed to have deeper relationships and engagement with the community over time. So I hope that between now and when you come back together to decide this later this fall, Chapter 8 can be elaborated about our actual plan to do that with some investments made so that we really have a clear pathway between now and the next RTP update. Which leads me to a small project that has a special place in our heart. I provided you a little map here. It's known to you as the Cross Levee Trail Project 11813. We call it the Park Rose Greenway. This project, positioned between Marine Drive and Sandy. Oh, I'm out of time. I'll send the rest of those via email. I apologize.
Oh, thank you.
Thanks, Sarah.
Much appreciated.
Thank you. All right, we now have Joe Courtwright. So Joe, I'm going to go ahead and promote you up to a panelist on Zoom. And as a reminder to everybody in the audience today, if you have not signed up in advance, you can do so now by hitting the raise hand button on Zoom or by letting me know if you are here in person. So Joe, you should be able to unmute and turn on your camera now. You'll have 3 minutes and your time will begin when you begin speaking.
Thank you. For the record, Joe Courtwright. I'm Director of City Observatory and a member of No More Freeways. As you consider the RTP, you know that the climate crisis is manifest. The smoke-filled skies of the last several summers, record high temperatures, boiling seas, melting glaciers, and fires are all evidence that the climate crisis is manifest. In the face of that, the Regional Transportation Plan is greenhouse gaslighting this region. Our adopted state goal, adopted 15 years ago, is to reduce greenhouse gases by 75% from 1990 levels. Transportation is the largest source of greenhouse gas emissions in the state and the region, and we are manifestly failing to reach our target. Compared to 1990, emissions in Multnomah County are up. They're up 27% in the metropolitan area. They're up 15% in the statewide. Similarly, when we look at the more recent evidence, what's happened since we adopted our climate plans, like Metro's 2014 so-called climate smart strategy, transportation emissions have continued to rise. State transportation emissions are up 1.5% per year. Portland Metro greenhouse gases are up 5% per year, and Multnomah County emissions are up 1.4% per year. Every inventory of greenhouse gases from transportation shows increases since you adopted your climate plans. We are now a quarter of the way through the planning horizon for the climate smart strategy. And none of this information about the actual trends in greenhouse gases is contained in the RTP. Instead, the RTP has created its own artificial world based on models that are not calibrated or reflecting of these inventories. Your staff has substituted the model values for the actual scientific measured emissions from this region. And you are making demonstrably false assumptions about changes in vehicles and fleets. Your modeling assumes that the average age of a car will be about 6 years in the future, up from or down from 10 years. It's actually increased to more than 12 years, and statewide is 14 years. That means many more older cars on the road. Metro also assumed that we would stop buying SUVs and trucks, and that 2/3 of vehicles would be passenger cars. In fact, 80% of the vehicles purchased now are dirtier trucks and SUVs. Your models essentially assume that everybody is driving a 6-year-old Honda Civic that generates about 250 grams per mile. The reality is more people are driving SUVs and pickup trucks that generate more than 500 grams per mile. As a result, your climate modeling is off by 100%. You've wildly understated the future growth in greenhouse gases. As a result, the modeling that's going into the Regional Transportation Plan fails to reflect what we need to do to achieve our stated and legally adopted climate goals. And the way that climate is treated in the Regional Transportation Plan is to assume that as long as the plan as a whole meets the overall objectives, there's no need to consider how individual projects worsen or improve our climate performance. That's why you end up spending close to $10 billion on additional freeway capacity, projects that will make emissions go up, increase car dependence, and worsen things. So in effect, what you have done
Joe,
is—
you're over time. If you could wrap up in the next 10 seconds.
Sure. Again, this is greenhouse gaslighting in your Regional Transportation Plan. You need to include actual data and show how we're failing to meet those objectives. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next up, we have Adriana Gonzalez, and on deck will be Jackie Trieger.
President Peterson, councilors, thank you for the opportunity to comment on the draft Regional Transportation Plan. My name is Ariadna Falcon Gonzalez, and I'm here on behalf of the Getting There Together Coalition. GTT, a coalition of housing, land use, youth, older adults, environment, and transportation justice advocates, aims to keep advocating for investments that support communities most in need of transportation options, drastically increase ridership and reduce emissions through improved transit and community-driven projects, and help people get where they need to go safely and quickly. GTT was formed in 2017 as a response to a potential ballot measure, eventually becoming Metro's 2020 transportation bond. GTT and its member organizations were critical partners in creating, debating, and campaigning this ballot measure. GTT's core values from this campaign are carried into our work now, and we believe that the RTP must continue the vision and values created from the 2020 transportation measure, which center on safety, climate action, and racial justice in transportation investments. GTT's engagement with community members in the last 4 years has highlighted that transportation disadvantaged people are not having their needs met concerning safety, accessibility, frequency, and security. We cannot prioritize freeway expansion while transit-dependent community members feel unsafe crossing the street to take their children to school or the doctor. We're living through a crisis in safety and climate. Our communities require urgent actions to realign priorities and funding to our goals. GTT appreciates the RTP focus on pricing to manage demand. An equitable administered demand management program would reinvest in transportation options, especially those for safety, walking, biking, and access and transit. Regional mobility pricing with an equitable pricing strategy would benefit our region. Still, we must have good transportation options beyond just a car or paying a fee to utilize the roads. We also need comprehensive strategy to address our orphan highways. While this RTP progresses on roads like 82nd Avenue, we still have so much more work to do as a region to advance jurisdictional transfers. Keeping our road safety and climate crisis in mind, we should ask ourselves how this RTP will help break the status quo in transportation, not support it. We need all agencies involved in the RTP to prioritize their investments because our community members deserve better metrics for equity impacts. How can we do this? Potentially by tuning the policies in Chapter 3. The chapter needs recalibration with greater urgency. Chapter 8 needs to be flushed out. We need to track ongoing changes in the RTP while establishing additional work that needs to be conducted to meet the needs of our community members. GTT wants a commitment to improve safety, provide multimodal options, and achieve equity. Lastly, GTT hopes that some of the feedback and suggestions before council can return to the public for another hearing sometime before the RTP is fully adopted. GTT and its member organizations welcome the opportunity to meet with staff and other stakeholders to refine critical areas of the RTP. Thank you for the chance to provide testimony today.
Thank you. Okay, next up we have Jackie Trieger, and on deck is Brett Morgan. So Jackie, you should be able to turn on your camera and unmute yourself. You'll have 3 minutes and your time will begin when you begin speaking.
Hi, dear President Peterson and councilors, thank you for the opportunity to comment on the draft regional transportation plan. My name is Jackie Trieger, and I'm the campaign manager for climate and transportation at the Oregon Environmental Council. OEC was founded in 1968 and is a nonprofit, nonpartisan, membership-based organization. We advance equitable, innovative, and collaborative solutions to Oregon's environmental challenges for today and future generations. OEC is a member of the Getting There Together Coalition and supported Metro's 2020 bond measure. We're excited by the vision of the RTP that by 2045, everyone in the greater Portland region will have safe, reliable, affordable, efficient, and climate-friendly travel options that allow people to choose to drive less and that support equitable, resilient, healthy, and economically vibrant communities in the region. With heat waves and wildfires raging across the state, we're constantly reminded with heat waves and wildfires raging across the state, we're constantly reminded what we face if we do not act with the urgency the climate crisis demands. There are many great policies in the RTP to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and vehicle miles traveled, such as the mobility pricing policies, prioritization of transportation investments, and implementation of land use plans. It's crucial that these policies are implemented equitably to align projects with reducing carbon emissions, air pollution, and vehicle miles traveled, and are held accountable to doing so. Previous RTP implementation has not met the greenhouse gas and VMT goals. Let's not let that happen this time around. And we know that in order to meet our climate goals, we need to both significantly electrify and reduce our vehicle miles traveled. So both prongs are crucial to meeting our goals. Thank you for all your work on the draft RTP and for the opportunity to comment today. I look forward to continuing to work with Metro Council.
Thank you. Next up, we've got Brett Morgan. And once again, folks, if you would like to sign up to testify and you have not already done so, you can do so by raising your hand, either on Zoom or in person. So Brett, your time will begin when you begin speaking.
Thank you, President Peterson and members of the Metro Council. And thank you for taking an extended listening session. I've watched quite a few Metro meetings, and this has been a very robust public comments even in the beginning and now. So I just appreciate that. For the record, my name is Brett Morgan, and I work as the Transportation Director and Legislative Manager at 1000 Friends of Oregon, and I'm joining from the edge of the urban growth boundary here in Helvetia. I'm here to comment on the draft RTP, and I want to commend staff, partners in the Metro staff, who've worked really hard to advance the RTP over several years. As Oregon's land use and planning watchdog, the RTP represents how we can use transportation planning into priorities to align policy, investments, and community needs. To begin, keeping in mind that we need to stay below the 2.5-degree warming targets within the IPCC reports, science dictates that we need to reduce VMT below 15% of current levels in order to meet our climate goals. And this is regardless if the vehicle is electric or gas. I would also be remiss if I did not mention that this summer has been hot. And while anecdotally, in fact, the 7 of the hottest global days on record in the last 100,000 years have happened in the last month. Water temperatures in Florida are nearly 100 degrees Fahrenheit. This underscores the need to change, even if that change is hard. As an organization as well, as an organization deeply committed to CFEC, I just want to commend how Metro has gone above and beyond the implementation of climate-friendly and equitable communities into the implementation of the RTP, and we think there's lots of good things that will happen from that. Expect more detailed comments from 1,000 Friends written on the record in the coming weeks, but I did want to emphasize a few things during this public comment period. First of all, the RTP needs to prioritize safety in the short and the long terms, and the projects need to be prioritized in that sense. And in doing so, using the framework identified in Chapter 7, particularly around communities of color, low-income communities, and other underserved communities as the investment framework for these safety investments is critical and needed. I'd also like to express strong support for the regional mobility pricing program as it continues to act as a North Star towards what a more equitable pricing scheme can be for our region, while delinking mega projects from pricing and allowing us to potentially reinvest those resources into better uses. I also want to speak strong support for the high capacity strategy. Within the 2020 measure, there was a lengthy and robust debate about how we would utilize BRT and other resources to effectively reprogram and increase the transit adoption within the region. And in fact, with that process found that we were able to capitalize and bring federal dollars down to our region if we were able to make those investments in bus rapid transit. I also want to speak in favor of transit-oriented development and the need for anti-displacement investments throughout the RTP. Gentrification is definitely happening through our region, and TOD is an incredible resource that we can use to help mitigate this. I will also follow up with a new 2023 report that we worked on with UC Denver that highlights the actual barriers to transit-oriented development in the region, and is far more extensive and reliable than a one-point and count time relative to how TOD is impacting our region. And I think it sets up on how critical TOD is in meeting our regional transportation and housing goals. Lastly, I'm over time, but lastly, I just know that we're coming up on a 2025 legislative package. As we work through this at the state level and realign priorities, we know that this RTP needs to set up the 2027 RTP to capitalize on this 2025 state legislative package to meet these goals. Thank you for your time, yes, thank you for your time.
Thank you. All right. I will look, that concludes everybody who has signed up in advance to testify. Is there anybody in the room who would like to testify still? We ran out of blue cards. Okay, and I will look on Zoom. I do not see any hands up on Zoom either, President Peterson.
Thank you. With that, I will close the public hearing on the draft RTP and high capacity plans. I also thank everyone for coming in to testify. We got a wide range of comments, and I really appreciate hearing all this. Since my colleagues are on JPACT, I don't get to revel in the transportation as much as I would like to. So it was good to hear that we're moving in the right direction generally, with some very specific things to continue to work on. So thank you for everybody's comments. With that, Councilor Nolan, did you want to add anything?
Yes, thank you, Madam President. I just have a question that I hope is quick.
For staff.
For staff, based on the testimony. The testimony from Mr. Courtright was that we are using out-of-date information for our model. And if fuel efficiency is going the wrong way, which it has been in significant ways, I would hate for us to be depending on meeting the climate goals of both the RTP and our climate smart policy, because we're assuming better performance by the average fleet than is actually happening. Can you address that?
Yes, Council President Peterson and Councilor Nolan. So the assumptions that we are using are the assumptions the state has provided us to use in our analysis. our targets that we're mandated to meet from the state level are in addition to what was expected by the state to happen from changes or the transition of the fleet and technology of the vehicles and fuels in our system. So we are using the information that we are required to use in the way that the state has provided them. I think what Mr. Courtwright has said is that those state assumptions, and this is something that we have also raised at the state level, there has been rulemaking by the Department of Environmental Quality that is getting the state on track with some of that transition, but the SUV and some of the other points that Mr. Courtwright was making is true. It's we are lagging behind as a state in some of those transitions, but we are using the model and the assumptions that the state has asked us to use, and we will continue to work at the state level and advocate at the state level for those other changes that are assumed in the state target setting process.
I'll take it offline, Madam President, but what I'm hearing you say is the state requires us to use a certain data set, but they don't preclude us from also modeling with actual, more current data, and I'd like to talk with you about that.
Yes.
Thank you. Any other questions for staff? Councilor Gonzalez.
Thanks, President Peterson. I'll just make a short comment to appreciate the testimony, wide-ranged in terms of, the request for Metro as this process moves forward. Wow, I didn't realize I lost my voice, but here I am. Excuse me. In the regional transportation plan process, as if you don't know, I'll try and explain a little bit. The Metro through the RTP, we work on the policy, the goal setting, the modeling, but there's a very close and critical relationship with the jurisdictional partners, the municipalities and the transportation agencies that ultimately submit the projects and own and operate the projects. And so this is a constant, ongoing, what I would say, a healthy tension of the priorities of the cities and the counties and the transportation agencies in the region, but also the work that we set in the North Star for our region. And this is where the testimony comes in, because I know as JPAC chair, I have the opportunity to work very closely with planning, development, research, and all the transportation staff that staff and work on the RTP, that they review every single piece of public comment and try and make every bit of comment, whether highly technical or very entry level, I guess I would say, find a way to connect that into how we roll out the projects, help create a prioritization, because we are spending approximately over $70 billion over the next 20 years in our transportation system. And there are a lot of different goals, and we strive to have a very strategic plan while also having it be balanced with the different needs of stakeholders. So I hope that you feel that your feedback is being incorporated, and not only feel, but I hope that by the time that this moves in towards adoption, you'll see some significant changes and improvements from the draft that we have now. Anyway, thank you so much. And although it's not a question, I appreciate staff as well for all your hard work.
Great, thank you. Any other counselor? All right, seeing none, thank you, much appreciated. We look forward to seeing you back, both on the urban growth boundary conversations and the next phase of the RTP. We'll move on to the Expo Futures Project update. This agenda item, as you'll recall, was supposed to be presented at our joint council and MERC meeting last week, but unfortunately we ran out of time there. We have asked staff for regular project updates to ensure that we are steering this project forward and keeping our foot on the gas. The Expo Futures team has been hard at work continuing to implement our direction and vision of memorializing the historical and cultural legacy of the site and redeveloping Expo into sports-centered facility. I know I am excited about the opportunity to add a new sports venue to our region's strong tourism and economic development strategy, and to be taking the lessons learned from the site's history of forced displacement and integrating them into new campus that brings communities and visitors together through recreation, learning, and play. Now we have Paul Slyman here from the Expo Futures team to update us on the process. Thank you.
Thank you, President Peterson, councilors, and thanks for inviting us back this week. It's a pleasure to be in front of you this afternoon. Connor, are my other teammates online? Just wanted to make sure.
Yes.
Okay.
Gian is up, as well as Jamie and Amy.
Thank you so much. And again, thanks for that nice introduction, President Peterson. I guess we'll need to correct how we're talking about this project because we're now keeping our feet on the bike pedals, not the gas anymore. So apologies for that. What we're going to do today, Council, is really give you an update of where we are and our project partnerships and the efforts our team's been making to build a coalition of people who deeply care about the future of the Expo Center. And we're going to tell you a little bit about the two primary RFPs serving each of the project major objectives. And Jamisha, would you forward to the next slide, please? We're going to talk about the sports feasibility and market analysis RFP process. We're going to talk about the community engagement request for proposals, as well as strategic communications, and share just a little bit about our governance committees with you as well. Next slide, please. I first want to talk about the important partnerships because none of this work happens without the great partners that we've been connecting with. President Peterson signed tribal letters to 6 tribes recently, and we've had conversations with 2 of those tribes. Great credit goes out to our tribal liaisons here at Metro for helping us to make sure that those relationships are bringing out the best interests of the tribes in the future of Expo. It's been very productive. We've also had meetings with the Japanese American Museum of Oregon, Oregon Black Pioneers, and others, and continuing coordination and education about their interests at this site. We've also continued to coordinate with the Interstate Bridge Replacement Project, have frequent conversations with them, as well as our own planning and development department to ensure that we're understanding that project and its progress. Tremendous partnership with Sport Oregon. I think you're well aware of that. We meet with them weekly. We also coordinate monthly meetings with the Sport Oregon Executive Director and our Chief Operating Officer to make sure that we're moving together in concert with what they know about the state of sport in Oregon and bringing their best knowledge to this work. You'll hear more about this in future remarks. And then most recently, consistent with some of the comments you've heard over the last hour or so, we just held with Expo staff a meeting with the Bonneville Environmental Foundation and Metro's sustainability team to talk about potential for solar out at the facility and how such solar might be sequenced there given our ambitions for the site. And then I will mention the Urban Land Institute has been very interested in this work and is entertaining, they conducted a seminar over a year ago that Councillor Lewis participated in, and they're interested in potentially funding some of our community outreach work as a model for other sites around the nation. Next slide, please. I'm going to talk a little bit about the sports and facilities RFP, but just briefly because we're already moving forward to the next request for proposals. That's the other part of this project. But since you gave us your direction in February at your joint meeting with Merck, the RFP for the sports feasibility study and market analysis has been written and it closed July 11th. Our window accepted proposals from all across the country, representing many of the top firms in this field, most of which partnered to create some compelling team submissions. Overall, there are over a dozen firms involved in the submissions that came to us, and the interviews will be conducted next week. There is a counselor and a commissioner on that interview panel along with community members, so we're very excited about those interviews helping us select the top consulting firm and then negotiating that scope of work and starting that feasibility study and market analysis in the coming month. Next slide, please, Jamisha. So some updates about our governance committees. In your past meetings, you've endorsed the committees that support our Chief Operating Officer's objectives that you see on your screen. I'm just going to briefly touch on the committees, and then Amy Nelson's going to tell you a little bit more about them. All major decisions will be made by Metro Council and Merck, as you can see at the top of your screen. But we have some really, really smart and experienced folks that will be advising us along the way. An executive advisory committee, you see there in sort of shaded blue, a historical significance and memorialization committee, and a sports and facilities committee. Members are being appointed by Marisa, and we've identified some really tremendous expertise and insight. Japanese American Museum of Oregon, the Oregon Historical Society, the Vanport Mosaic, the Miller Foundation, just to name a few, to help support the work of the Historical Significance and Memorialization Committee. And then individuals who work in professional, collegiate, recreational, and youth sports are filling out the Sports and Facility Committee you see on the right side, my right side of the screen there. And then for that Executive Advisory Committee, we have members from all across the region. Thanks to counselors and commissioners for helping us to identify people that include travel and tourism groups and others filling out that Executive Advisory Committee. I'd like to let Amy tell you a little bit more about these committees and how we'll work with them. So let me pass it to Amy now.
Thank you, Paul. Hello, counselors. I'm Amy Nelson, Executive Assistant for Metro Visitor Venues. I'm excited to be serving as the administrator for the Executive Advisory Committee, as well as the Sports and Facilities Committee. The Executive Advisory Committee's function is to provide guidance to the overall project and elevate the Expo Future project to the community. This committee will be co-chaired by Metro Council President Lynn Pearson and MERC Chair Kara Stoudemire Phillips, and we anticipate to meet quarterly. Our hope is to include opportunities for public comment so that committee members can hear directly from the people we're serving. The Executive Advisory Committee will include co-chairs from the Historical Significance and Memorialization Committee and the Sports and Facilities Committee. That way, we'll ensure that the EAC is getting timely information directly from the committees that are working on the project. The Sports and Facilities Committee will function to guide the RFP study, engage with midterm executive summaries, and shape outcomes of the feasibility study, and this group will meet monthly. This committee will be co-chaired by Renee King, Community Relations Manager at Providence, and the second co-chair position will be shared by James Jesse, Chief Sales Officer, and Megan Conway, Chief Strategy Officer at Travel Portland. I'll note that Councillor Lewis and Commissioner Pendleton will also serve on this committee. My colleague, Jovian Davis, is out today, but she will be serving as the administrator for the Historical Significance and Memorialization Committee. This committee is tasked with guiding our community engagement process, centering the communities most impacted by the site at the Expo Center, especially Vanport residents and descendants, the Japanese American community, and Indigenous community members. The Historical Significance Memorialization Committee will be co-chaired by Councillor Ed Washington at Portland State University and Lynn Fujigami Parks, former executive director of the Japanese American Museum of Oregon. We're also grateful to have Councillor Simpson and Commissioner Martinez serving on this committee. And with that, I'll pass it back to Paul.
Thanks so much, Amy. And as you see, we are anticipating these will be very high-touch committees in keeping with your expectations and Marisa's expectations of us. We also are working on strategic communications, and so I'd like to introduce Jamie Mathis. Jamie's our strategic communications specialist. We just hired her, but some of you may recognize Jamie from her work on Phase 1 last summer. She helped boost our community engagement significantly and helped us get a lot more input into the future of Expo in doing so. So Jamie, let me pass it to you.
And Jamie's just coming from the other side. Sorry about that.
And we might need to advance to the next slide, please. Thank you.
Great. Hello, counselors. My name is Jamie Mathis. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm working on the strategic communications, as Paul said, for this project specifically. So just wanted to fill you in on a couple of things that we've been doing and that we're thinking about. So after a 6-month lull, we're working on strategic communications platform for Phase 2. And our intention is to be able to develop some communications tools that will allow our project team and the Metro body at large to speak about this project in one voice. So the major functions of the plan are to keep information flowing between our constituents, our key stakeholders, and staff. So we're thinking about our audiences really keenly and how to communicate with them. So you might have noticed, for example, that we've resumed sending out our monthly newsletter to Expo Future stakeholders, which is including community members, stakeholders and Expo show producers, and it's about 1,000 people that we are sending that newsletter out to. We've also launched our project page on the metro.gov website, which you can find under What's Happening and then under the Expo Future Project. And so I encourage you to check that out. And if you have any feedback or thoughts, please feel free to let me know. And then our governance committee appointment letters are going out from the COO. Those are in process right now, and they will be welcoming our members and informing them of their roles and their logistics of being community members, or committee members rather. And then finally, we're working towards creating a more regular routine for our communications within the project that incorporates the voices of our communities that have been impacted by Expo Center and the larger community through increased storytelling. So we're really hoping to capture a lot of those voices through our community engagement process. So in closing, I'd just say if you have any thoughts, if you have any needs as we are developing our communications tools, please reach out to me. I have a very open door policy, and I will pass it off to our project manager, Jan Kim.
Thanks, Jamie. Let's go to the next slide. And let's go to the next slide after one. This. Good afternoon, President Peterson and councilors. I'm Jan Kim, the Development Project Manager for this project. You've heard quite a bit about our sports facility related activities over the past couple of updates. Today, I'm going to shift gears and discuss our community engagement efforts. But before we get into the details of that, I'd like to take a moment to highlight our two main groups of project stakeholders, and then talk a little bit about our past work. First, we have the community groups that have significant cultural ties to Expo. The communities listed on the upper left of your screen: Japanese American community, Vanport descendants, and Black community, urban, indigenous, and our tribal government partners. We often refer to them, because that's a little bit of a mouthful, as the community and tribes most impacted by the site. And you'll hear that continuing in the future, that this is what we mean when we say communities most impacted by the site. Our engagement efforts with these communities will result in a set of shared recommendations on how to meaningfully memorialize the site's cultural and historical significance. And then our second group is on the bottom left. This includes Expo clients, vendors, partners, our visitors. After we have a better sense of the feasibility of this project and a more defined strategy to speak to, we'll be increasing our engagement efforts with these groups about the entire campus redevelopment, and that will be later on in 2024. We refer to this as our broader community engagement efforts. Next slide. And just a reminder, we are not beginning from scratch. In phase one, during the DOS and the RFEI, the Expo Future team conducted engagement activities with the communities and tribes most impacted by the site and Expo's current clients. You can see the roadmap below. There were 9 meetings that had happened to kind of engage each individual stakeholder group. Since then, we've been continuing to build relationships and trust with individuals and organizations. Many of the groups we've engaged in phase one are serving in our governance structure in phase two. So what Amy had just spoke to earlier. As we move forward, we're deepening the bench of relationship holders on the Merck and Metro side. We have a larger project team now. Our governance committee structure is represented by counselors and commissioners. And that I believe that helps foster a more direct point of communication with each organization or community member who is involved and engaged in this project. We really just want to ensure that community voices are being heard at the highest level of leadership, and that's why we've structured our governance structure that way. Next slide. Let's talk about community engagement in phase two. I like to think of it as a roadmap with 2 main lanes that kind of eventually merge into one. On the upper lane focuses on objective 1 conversations, where we look back on the site's history and meaningfully memorialize the stories of the communities and tribes, and infuse the values and lessons learned in the campus to serve, so that the campus serves future generations. We'll talk about the RFP for that body of work in the next slide. The bottom lane is more about the broader community engagement. While some client outreach may happen before next spring. We'll largely focus these efforts after we analyze the results of the feasibility study. We know more about the direction of the redevelopment effort. We really want folks to be focused on things that we know that could be a possibility rather than them just focused on an idea. And we really want to have something concrete to bring to community as we move forward. The project team and steering committee will then take all the data of our feasibility process, our funding analysis, our community engagement, and propose a set of options to move forward on. You'll see that after the red arrow on the right, we'll culminate. All this will culminate into an actionable redevelopment plan for council and commission to consider at the end of next year. Next slide. So lastly, we're just going to talk about our RFP for our community engagement efforts for largely for Objective 1. Our plan is to hire an engagement firm that will be co-selected by representatives from the committee. And while the basic building blocks you see on the screen are set, how we get there will be co-developed with our community partners. Some of the major highlights of this plan include a day of storytelling where each community most impacted by the site can share directly with their connection with the campus directly with each other and discuss their desired process for generating recommendations. And as Paul alluded to earlier, this community day of storytelling is something that ULI is really interested in and interested in potentially funding. And we've spoken with ULI headquarters about this particular project with great interest. The committee will work together to determine the types of information, qualitative and quantitative data they need to make a set of recommendations. And then you'll see in step 2, or step 3, we're going to actually engage with community. And this will largely happen after the feasibility study when there's a more defined sense of which direction we're going. And then most of our engagement activities in this lane will take place concurrent with the engagement for the broader community. Lastly, in 4, we'll have a facilitated conversation with our Objective 1 community to talk about how do we take all this information and come up with a unified set of recommendations. This will be pivoted to, the recommendations will go to Metro COO. The COO will look at all the information from both lanes and then incorporate it into a phase 2 recommendations. And so that's largely our community engagement approach. And then I think Paul will facilitate some questions.
Thank you, Jean. And counselors and President Peterson, everything we've described for you now is to take place over this next 18 months to culminate in December 2024. Some proposals from Marisa to you and some direction from you to staff. So you've heard from our team, and you also know that we're working very closely with the Expo staff and Steve in bringing all this to you. So there's many people represented in this. We have governance structures, we have relationships, and today is really about checking in with you about our progress as we ramp up the committee process. And there should be a question on the next slide, and we'd like to sort of pass it to you, President Peterson and counselors, to see if you have any guidance or feedback for us about the processes you just heard us explain.
Great, thanks for the overview. Counselors, any comments? Questions? Counselor Lewis.
Sure, thank you so much. I just want to thank the team. Really happy with the progress that's taken us a few years to get from conceptual, what are we going to do, to here we are looking at some direction, but still need community before we can actually decide definitively what structures go up and how the place looks and feels to interact with on the ground. So we have a there, but it's definitely going to take community and frankly, private investment in order for us to really change the site. So the opportunity to work in this committee structure gives us the structure that we need to be government. But I would just encourage us to continue to be community accessible and flexible, like we were with the RFQI when we heard from community that the structure we put in place wasn't quite working for them. They needed less barriers to submitting a letter essentially, and we were able to adapt for that. I would hope we can do that again with input for the next steps. And then I think thinking specifically about sport, like, wow, we're at a really cool moment in history with US Women's World Cup team really representing Portland well. I just want to think through how to kind of mobilize the prominence that we have in that athletic sport, and women and non-binary folks being able to participate equally at the site. That's something that I think is a value shared by much of our community, but we need to just be explicit when we say it. Thanks.
Great, thank you. Councillor Wong.
Great. Thank you, Madam President, and thanks for all the work that your team has done to date. I was glancing through the reference slides, and I see the budget, and to me, it just seems like the amount of engagement that we hope to do and the budget don't mesh in my eye. And I'm wondering, is the budget that you have listed here sufficient? And I guess I understand it might be augmented by potentially private dollars for Urban Land Institute, but I guess what would be missing budget-wise to do a great job on the engagement and communications piece?
Well, thank you for that question, Councillor Huang and President Peterson. We received a similar comment from Merck when we've presented to them as well, and we're doing our best to be good stewards of public funds, but also accomplish the engagement that you expect of us. The budget that you're seeing in the reference slide is a one-year budget that began July 1st and will get us through the next 12 months. There's a reasonable chance that for the following months of next fiscal year, we would need additional funds. Where it stands right now, we're about to go out for this engagement RFP. If the proposals that come in are non-responsive because our budget isn't high enough, then we'll talk with our COO and see if perhaps that needs to be adjusted. We feel good about it. We were deeply involved in Metro's communication staff, working with Leah Wairioli and others in pulling these numbers together. So I'll say we feel good about it, but I appreciate you commenting. And as Jean and I both mentioned, the Urban Land Institute's interest in our project helps us seek additional funding that could be brought to bear to meaningfully engage the community. And it just feels great to me and the project team to know that they're so interested in this work that they want to help pay for some of it so they can use it as a model elsewhere. But we'll monitor that budget closely, and I'm sure Brian Kennedy, our budget officer somewhere, is listening to me and is making notes and is probably going to talk to me after this meeting. So thanks.
And now there'll be a test for Brian.
Yeah.
Let's see. Any other comments? Oh, Councilor Gonzalez.
Thanks, President Peterson. A short thank you to the team. The approach is multifaceted, multi-pronged. It's been really rewarding to see the way the work has rolled out, from the request for expressed interest to where we are now, and how we are taking solid steps to really not just deliver a project, but to move this institution and that neighborhood and that part of the region into a new future, while also really honoring the past and present communities that are impacted and that benefit from that site. So I just want to take a moment to really acknowledge how comprehensive the project and the approach is. I mean, down to the last slide, the question that you asked the council, very refreshing to see the question posed in that manner. But in terms of where we are now, I feel very confident, and I look forward to the next steps. I know that these next few weeks we'll have a few different opportunities to engage with some decision points. So thank you, Paul, and thank you to the entire team. Thank you.
Counselor Lewis.
Sure, thank you. Not directly related to the question we were asked and why I'm sticking my hand up at the end a second time. I just want to publicly acknowledge the work Gian's put into this. It's been a labor of real labor and love and emotion, and her personal connection and ability to community in Portland. And the news has started to break, but Gian will be leaving us in 2 months. And I'm sad to see her go, and just needed to take this moment to recognize her and hope that she doesn't go too far, and that we can remain in partnership.
Thank you for those words. I really appreciate it.
I would just say ditto, news to me, but thank you so much for shepherding this along and all the great work. Much appreciated. All right, with that, thank you, Paul. Thank you to the team, and we look forward to moving this along with Merck.
All right, thank you.
All right, we'll move on to Chief Operating Officer Communications.
Thank you, Council President, and good afternoon, councilors. Just one update today, and you should have this in your email, but we opened our employee survey yesterday. This is an activity that we engage in every other year. We poll our employees and try to collect both quantitative and qualitative data about their experience at Metro. We benchmark ourselves to questions that are asked by Gallup across the country, so that we can see how we measure up or don't. And it really, the results of the survey inform our work plans across the organization. So really encourage all of our employees to weigh in. It's one of the most important ways that we gather information. It's anonymous, and so hopefully people can feel that they can share freely what their experience is, good, bad, or ugly, because we want to know and we want to constantly improve. So that's all I have for you today. Thanks.
Thank you. I think that to that point, none of us know how to do everybody's jobs, and we don't know all the barriers and good things that they see on a daily basis. So it is really important to share, and I appreciate you bringing that up.
100%.
Thanks. Literally don't know how to do everybody's job. That's why we hired them.
That's right.
Councilors, we'll move on to councilor communication. Councilor Lewis.
Sure, thank you so much. Thanks for everybody's patience as I'm home today. It is the 1 week this year that preschool is closed. I'm delighted my preschool teacher gets a vacation. I have more appreciation for her than ever before with 1 week at home with 2 kids. But I did want to make sure that my fellow counselors were aware that the city of Portland on Friday via Dan Ryan has announced that they are going to exit the IGA with RAC. We are a party to that IGA as well. I believe that for several years, we've had discussions internally about what we needed to see better fulfilled from the terms of that agreement. We've had some frustrations at Metro, but in the joint agreement, basically says any party can leave, and City of Portland has announced their intent to do so. So just wanted to raise that in case you have additional questions. I have copy of the IGA, top of my inbox, and I'm happy to help with any questions that I can. Thanks.
Yes, just following up on that, what is our intent to have a conversation around that, Marisa? What is our intention to have a conversation about our portion of RAC? You can come back with a recommendation.
That is a great question. I'm gonna leave with my camera here. I think it's worthy of a conversation. I think my understanding is that it's been a long time coming, and there's been various levels of dissatisfaction by the other partners who fund the organization, and so I believe we are collecting just sort of the basic information right now about how much and when. We do contribute an amount each year, and we have sort of put a pause on that until we can understand more about what's happening with the rest of the organization.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, Councilor Lewis, for bringing it up. Councilor Wong.
Great, thank you. Just a quick update. We had MPAC yesterday, and we had a great update on happenings in the last lead session. And then we had two presentations, one on kind of the urban growth management process, as well as a presentation from Echo Northwest on gentrification and its displacement trends. And then we ended with an RTP update.
Good, thank you. Anybody else? All right, with that, seeing no other hands raised in person or online, I will adjourn this meeting, and our next regular scheduled meeting is September 5th at 10:30 a.m. Since the council is on recess, that does not mean we're not working. It means that we are not holding council meetings in business meetings and work sessions. So thank you, everybody, and we'll see you back here September 5th.